My parents transferred our generations-old family restaurant chain to my sister without warning, announcing it during our annual company retreat with champagne toasts celebrating her natural leadership. I smiled politely through dinner while they dismissed my MBA and decade of dedication as nice efforts. 2 months later, when the bank foreclosed on 3 locations because of my sister's undisclosed gambling debts, they discovered I'd secretly purchased the original flagship restaurant through an LLC I'd established years before, the only property legally protected by my grandfather's ironclad succession clause that my parents had completely forgotten about. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through antique lace curtains, casting intricate patterns across the worn hardwood floors of my apartment. I stood by the window, coffee mug warming my palms, watching Richmond slowly awaken. This quiet moment of peace would be the last I'd enjoy for several days. Today was the official start of Mancini's restaurant's 50th anniversary celebration, 5 decades since my grandfather Vittorio had opened the doors of his small Italian eatery in downtown Richmond. From a single restaurant with 12 tables, Mancini's had grown to a beloved regional chain with 15 locations across Virginia and North Carolina. The golden anniversary celebration would culminate in a gala dinner at the original flagship location, where my grandfather's portrait still watched over diners from its place of honor above the antique bar he'd imported from Naples. You ready? For today? The text from my sister Sophia appeared on my phone. Mom wants everyone at the original location by 9 for photos before the press arrives. I sent a quick confirmation before setting my mug in the sink. At 34, I'd spent exactly half my life working in the family business. Starting as a hostess at 14, I'd worked every position from dishwasher to line cook before leaving for college. After earning my MBA from Wharton with a focus on restaurant management and sustainable business practices, I'd returned home, determined to help modernize Mancini's while preserving the soul my grandfather had infused into every recipe. My role as director of operations meant overseeing daily management across all 15 locations, handling staffing issues, quality control, vendor relationships, and the 1,000 small crises that arose in restaurant management. It was exhausting, exhilarating work that often meant 16-hour days and middle-of-the-night calls about broken refrigeration units or last-minute catering emergencies. As I dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with a deep burgundy blouse, Mancini's signature color, I reviewed mental checklists for the day's events. The press would want statements about our history, our plans for expansion, and our adaptation to changing culinary trends while maintaining traditional quality. My father, Antonio, would handle most of the talking. He'd always been the public face of Mancini's, with his charismatic smile and perfect Italian accent, despite having been born in Virginia. I arrived at the original Mancini's 20 minutes early, using my key to enter through the kitchen. The space was already humming with preparation for both the media event and regular service. Head chef Marco, who'd trained under my grandfather and stayed loyal to the family for 30 years, nodded a greeting as he inspected a simmering pot of Nonna Mancini's secret marinara sauce. "Smells like childhood," I said, leaning over to inhale the fragrant steam. Marco smiled, the creases around his eyes deepening. 50 years, and not one ingredient has changed. Your grandfather would be proud of how you've protected his legacy, Elena. His words warmed me as I continued through the restaurant. The dining room had been refreshed for the anniversary. New upholstery on the booths in rich burgundy leather, polished hardwood floors, and updated lighting that maintained the warm, intimate atmosphere that had made Mancini's famous. I'd overseen the renovation personally, spending evenings after closing consulting with designers and mornings before opening checking the craftsman's work. The front door chimed, and my mother entered, elegant as always in a designer suit, her dark hair showing only a few strands of silver despite her 62 years. She air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume enveloping me in a cloud of expensive scent. "Elena, darling, you're early. Excellent. We need to discuss seating arrangements for the gala. The governor's office confirmed he'll attend, and we need to make sure he's not seated near the Castellanis. You know they've been at odds since that highway project." I nodded, pulling out my tablet to make notes. My mother, Vivian, had married into the Mancini family 35 years ago, bringing her Southern aristocratic background and business acumen to complement my father's culinary heritage. She'd transformed Mancini's from a successful local restaurant into a regional name, handling the business expansion while my father focused on food quality and customer experience. "Is Dad here yet?" I asked, glancing toward the office. "He's parking the car. Sophia is running late, as usual." A hint of indulgence colored my mother's tone. "She had a charity breakfast this morning, networking with potential investors for the Charleston expansion." The Charleston expansion, Mancini's first venture into South Carolina, had been Sophia's project for the past year. At 30, my younger sister had recently completed her MBA at Duke, joining the family business officially just 3 years ago as Director of Marketing and Development. Where I'd worked my way through every position in the restaurant, Sophia had pursued a different path, interning at marketing firms and hospitality groups before bringing her polished external perspective to Mancini's. The door chimed again, admitting my father and sister together, deep in animated conversation. At 65, Antonio Mancini remained handsome and vital, his salt and pepper hair and trim physique giving him the look of a distinguished actor rather than a restaurateur. Beside him, Sophia sparkled with energy, her designer dress and perfect blowout making her look like she'd stepped from a magazine rather than a breakfast meeting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Elena." She embraced me warmly. "The place looks amazing. The design team you chose did fantastic work with the renovations." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely appreciative of her enthusiasm. Despite our differences in approach, Sophia and I maintained a solid relationship. "How was the investor breakfast?" "Productive," she beamed. "The Blackwell Group is seriously interested in backing our expansion beyond Charleston. They see franchise potential all along the eastern seaboard." My father clapped his hands together. "Wonderful news, but we'll discuss business later. Today is about celebrating our history before we plan our future. The photographer will be here any minute." The next 2 hours passed in a whirlwind of posed family photos, interviews with local and regional press, and carefully orchestrated tours of the original kitchen where my grandfather had created the recipes that became Mancini family treasures. I answered questions about operational challenges, sustainability initiatives, and our farm-to-table partnerships with local producers, all programs I'd developed over the past decade. By noon, the media portion of the day had concluded, and we transitioned to a private family lunch in the restaurant's back room. This space, originally my grandfather's office, had been converted to an intimate dining area reserved for family, celebrations, and VIP guests. The walls were lined with photographs documenting Mancini's history. My grandfather cutting the ribbon on opening day in 1974, my father taking over after Vittorio's retirement, the opening of each new location, and family milestones intertwined with business achievements. My grandfather, now 92 and residing in an assisted living facility, would join us for the gala dinner, but had been too tired for the morning's media circus. His absence at the table was palpable as servers brought out his original recipes. Fried zucchini flowers, arancini, and the brassato al barolo that had put Mancini's on the culinary map half a century ago. "A toast," my father said, raising his glass of Barbaresco, "to 50 remarkable years and the next 50 to come. To Mancini's." "To Mancini's," we echoed, glasses clinking in celebration. As we ate, conversation flowed naturally to business matters, upcoming lease renewals, a potential new supplier for our imported cheeses, the renovation schedule for our Raleigh location. These discussions typically involved all four of us, with my operational expertise balancing Sophia's marketing perspective, all under my parents' experienced guidance. Before we get too deep into logistics, my father said, setting down his fork, your mother and I want to share some news that relates to the future of Mancini's. Something in his tone made me pause, wineglass halfway to my lips. My mother reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining in practiced synchronicity. As you know, she continued, we've been considering succession planning for some time. With the business reaching this milestone anniversary, and your father approaching retirement age, we've made some decisions about Mancini's leadership going forward. My pulse quickened. Succession planning had been a delicate topic, occasionally mentioned but never seriously discussed. Both Sophia and I had assumed leadership would eventually be shared between us, with our different strengths complementing each other as my parents had. We've decided, my father said, his gaze shifting between Sophia and me, that effective after the anniversary celebrations, Sophia will be appointed as CEO of Mancini's restaurant group, with full decision-making authority for the company's future direction. The world seemed to stop. I felt the weight of the announcement like a physical blow, robbing me of breath and coherent thought. Across the table, Sophia's eyes widened in apparent surprise before a smile bloomed across her face. I don't know what to say, she managed, looking between our parents. Say you'll accept, my mother encouraged, reaching across to squeeze Sophia's hand. We've discussed this extensively, and with your vision for expansion and your natural leadership abilities, you're the right choice to take Mancini's to the next level. I struggled to find my voice, aware that my reaction in this moment would be remembered. This is unexpected, I finally said, fighting to keep my tone neutral. I thought succession would involve both of us. I've been managing operations for over a decade. My father's expression softened with what looked uncomfortably like pity. Elena, your operational skills are valuable, and we hope you'll continue in that role. But leading a growing company requires vision and strategic thinking. Sophia's marketing background and her proposals for expansion align better with where Mancini's needs to go. The restaurant industry is changing rapidly, my mother added. Sophia's connections with investor groups and her understanding of branding will be essential for competing in today's market. I sat very still, processing their words. 17 years of dedication, working holidays, solving crises, preserving quality while increasing efficiency, dismissed as merely valuable but insufficient. Meanwhile, Sophia's 3 years and external connections were deemed visionary leadership. Of course, I said finally, raising my glass with a steady hand that belied my inner turmoil. Congratulations, Sophia. I look forward to supporting your leadership. Relief visibly washed over my parents' faces at my apparent acceptance. Sophia, to her credit, looked somewhat uncomfortable with the situation, though her excitement was evident. We'll still be a team, she assured me. You're operational. Expertise is irreplaceable, Elena. The conversation shifted to practical details, legal transfers, announcement timing, transition plans, while I maintained a professional facade through sheer force of will. Inside, my mind raced through years of memories, nights spent sleeping on a cot in the office during snowstorms to ensure restaurants could open safely the next day, weekends sacrificed to train new managers, holidays worked so others could be with their families. The promotion to Director of Operations I'd earned through demonstrated capability rather than familial connection. When lunch concluded, I excused myself politely, citing preparation needs for the evening service. In reality, I needed space to breathe, to process the seismic shift that had just occurred beneath the celebratory surface of our anniversary. In the quiet of the empty bar area, I found myself standing before my grandfather's portrait. Vittorio Mancini gazed out from the canvas with keen eyes that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. He'd built Mancini's from nothing after immigrating with empty pockets and a head full of family recipes. His philosophy had always been simple. Quality food, fair prices, and treating staff like family ensured loyal customers and sustainable success. "What would you say about this, Nono?" I whispered to his painted face. My phone vibrated with a text from Sophia. "Can we talk privately before the dinner rush?" I agreed to meet her in the small garden behind the restaurant, another of my projects, where we grew fresh herbs and tomatoes for the flagship location's kitchen. When I arrived, Sophia was already there, pacing nervously among the fragrant basil and rosemary plants. "Elena, I swear I didn't know they were going to announce that today," she began, her expression troubled. "We'd discussed possibilities, but I thought we were still in the consideration phase." I studied my sister's face, finding genuine discomfort there. "But you've been discussing it with them. Without me." She had the grace to look ashamed. "They approached me about expansion possibilities. It evolved from there into broader conversations. About leadership. I should have insisted you be included." "Yes, you should have." I kept my voice level. 17 years, Sophia. I've given this company everything." "I know," she said quietly. "And your operational systems are the backbone of our success. Nothing would function without the infrastructure you've built." "But that's not enough for the top position." She hesitated. "Mom and Dad think the future is in expansion and modern marketing approaches. It's not that your contribution isn't valued." The platitude stung worse than outright dismissal would have. "My contribution is keeping 15 restaurants running profitably while maintaining the quality standards Nono established. That's not a supporting role. It's the essence of what makes Mancini's successful." "I know that," Sophia insisted, "and I'll need your expertise more than ever. We can make this work, Elena. We've always been a good team." The sincerity in her voice nearly broke through my composure. Sophia wasn't the villain here. She was accepting an opportunity our parents had chosen to offer her instead of me. In her position, would I have declined? The honest answer was probably not. "I need some time," I told her finally. "Tonight is about celebrating Mancini's anniversary. Let's focus on making it perfect for Nono and the family legacy. We can discuss the future later." Relief flooded her face. "Absolutely. Tonight is about honoring the past 50 years. As she headed back inside, I remained in the garden, drawing deep breaths of herb-scented air. The initial shock was evolving into something more complex, disappointment mingled with resolve. The question wasn't whether I could continue working under Sophia's leadership, it was whether I should. For the first time in 17 years, I allowed myself to imagine a professional life outside Mancini's. What would it look like to apply my experience elsewhere? To build something new with the knowledge I'd gained? The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Before I could pursue that line of thinking further, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Golden Oaks Assisted Living, my grandfather's residence. "Ms. Mancini, this is Nurse Jenkins. Your grandfather is asking to see you before the celebration tonight. He's quite insistent." "Is everything all right?" I asked, immediately concerned. "His health is stable, but he's been quite agitated since morning. He keeps saying he needs to speak with you specifically about the papers before the anniversary dinner." "Tell him I'll be there within the hour," I promised, already heading toward my car. Golden Oaks was a premium senior living facility 20 minutes outside Richmond, where my grandfather had moved 3 years ago after a minor stroke made living alone inadvisable. His suite was spacious and comfortable, decorated with mementos from his long life, photographs of Italy, awards from culinary associations, and family pictures spanning generations. When I arrived, I found him sitting in his favorite armchair by the window, more alert than I'd seen him in months. At 92, Vittorio Mancini remained imposing, tall and broad-shouldered despite age's inevitable stoop, with a full head of white hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Ah, Elena," he said in his accented English, extending gnarled hands toward me. "You came quickly. Good." I embraced him gently, kissing his papery cheek. No, what's wrong? The nurse said you were upset." He waved away my concern. "Not upset. Determined. Today is important. Not just for the anniversary, but for you." He gestured toward a wooden box on the side table. "Bring that here." I recognized the box, hand-carved olive wood from his hometown in Italy. It had always sat in his office at the original restaurant, containing what he called the important papers. "Open it," he instructed. Inside, I found neatly organized documents, the original deed to the first Mancini's location, handwritten recipes, old photographs, and legal papers yellow with age. "Take out the blue folder," he directed. The folder contained a thick legal document, its cover page identifying it as Succession Agreement for Vittorio Mancini's Business Interests, dated 15 years earlier. "Read page 3, he said, watching me intently. As I scanned the dense, legal text, certain phrases leapt out. "Original flagship location shall remain separate from any corporate restructuring. Succession of the founding restaurant shall pass directly to the most senior family member actively engaged in operations for no less than 15 consecutive years. And most strikingly, this provision supersedes any subsequent arrangements and cannot be altered without the express written consent of Vittorio Mancini or his designated successor to the original property." I looked up, meeting my grandfather's knowing gaze. No. Does this mean what I think it means?" A smile creased his weathered face. "When your father and mother began expanding, I insisted on protecting the heart of our family legacy. The other locations could become part of their corporation, but the original restaurant, my restaurant, would follow different rules." "You have worked in operations for 17 years. Yes?" I nodded, still processing the implications. "Then according to that agreement, which your parents signed when we restructured for expansion, the original Mancini's belongs to you, not to the corporation they control. They may have forgotten, but I have not." "But they just announced Sophia as CEO of the entire company," I said, "of Mancini's restaurant group C, but not of the original location. That was never theirs to give away." He tapped the document with a gnarled finger. "This is legally binding. I had my lawyer confirm last week when I heard rumors about succession planning. The revelation left me stunned." "You knew they were planning to appoint Sophia?" He snorted. "I may be old, but I am not blind or deaf. Your mother has always favored Sophia's approach, flashy, growth-focused. She never fully understood that a restaurant succeeds first on food and experience, then on business strategy." I carefully replaced the document in its folder. "What are you suggesting I do with this information, Nono?" His eyes, still sharp, despite his advanced age, fixed on mine. "That depends on what you want, Elena. If you are content to work under your sister's leadership, do nothing. But if you believe, as I do, that you have earned the right to control your own destiny in this family, then you must decide what that destiny should be." "They'll see this as a betrayal," I said quietly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps they will recognize that they made a mistake in undervaluing your contribution." He reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "When I came to this country, I had nothing but my recipes and my determination. I built something from nothing because I refused to let others decide my worth. You have the same spirit, Elena. I have always seen it in you." As I left Golden Oaks with the blue folder tucked securely in my bag, my mind raced with possibilities. The legal document gave me ownership of the original Mancini's, the historical heart of the family business, the location with the strongest reputation and most loyal customer base. It was both leverage and opportunity, depending on how I chose to use it. That evening, as I dressed for the gala celebration in a deep burgundy gown that matched the restaurant's signature color, I made my decision. I would attend the anniversary dinner, toast 50 years of Mancini's success, and honor my grandfather's legacy. I would smile for photographs and speak graciously about family tradition if asked. And tomorrow, I would begin writing the next chapter of that tradition, one that honored the past while creating space for my own vision of the future. The anniversary gala was everything we had planned: elegant, nostalgic, and celebratory. The original Mancini's glowed with candlelight, each table adorned with arrangements of burgundy roses and white lilies. Historical photographs and newspaper clippings created a timeline along one wall, documenting the restaurant's evolution from humble beginnings to regional prominence. My grandfather arrived to thunderous applause, escorted by my father to a place of honor at the center table. Distinguished guests, loyal customers from the early days, local officials, culinary peers who had become friends over decades, filled the room with warmth and memories. Throughout the evening, I performed my role perfectly, directing service details, ensuring wine pairings were executed flawlessly, and smoothing the countless small issues that arise during any major event. If anyone noticed the new intensity behind my smile or the determination in my posture, they attributed it to the emotional significance of the milestone we were celebrating. During dessert, Nono's famous tiramisu prepared according to his original recipe, my father rose to deliver the evening's keynote address. His speech traced the journey of Mancini's from a single restaurant to a flourishing enterprise, weaving personal anecdotes with business milestones. He praised my grandfather's vision, my mother's business acumen, and, to my carefully concealed dismay, announced Sophia's upcoming appointment as CEO. As we celebrate our first 50 years, he concluded, raising his glass, we look forward to the next generation leading Mancini's into a bright future under Sophia's visionary guidance. Polite applause filled the room, with many guests turning to congratulate my sister, who acknowledged the recognition with gracious nods. My grandfather, I noticed, remained expressionless, his eyes finding mine across the room with a barely perceptible nod. The evening continued with dancing and more reminiscing until finally, well past midnight, the last guests departed. Only family remained: my parents, Sophia, myself, and Nono, who had insisted on staying until the very end of his restaurant's celebration despite his advanced age. A magnificent evening, my mother declared, collapsing elegantly into a chair. Everything went perfectly, Elena. Your attention to detail was impeccable as always. Thank you, I replied, accepting the compliment with a genuine smile. Despite everything, I took pride in executing a flawless event that honored our family legacy. My grandfather cleared his throat. Before we close this celebration, I have something to say. His voice, though softened by age, still commanded attention. 50 years ago, I opened these doors with nothing but determination and faith in my abilities. Today, I see that same determination in my granddaughter, Elena. My parents exchanged confused glances. Sophia has that determination too, Papa, my father said carefully. That's why we've chosen her to lead the company forward. My grandfather's expression remained impassive. I am not questioning your decision for the company. I am acknowledging Elena's 17 years of dedication to operations, particularly here, in the original Mancini's. He turned to me. Elena understands, as I did, that a restaurant is not merely a business, but a living promise to every customer who walks through the door. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother shifted in her seat, her expression tightening. Of course, Elena's contribution is valued. She'll continue as director of operations under Sophia's leadership. Actually, I said, finding my voice with surprising steadiness, I've been considering some changes to my role. All eyes turned to me. "What sort of changes?" my father asked, wariness evident in his tone. I took a deep breath. "After today's announcement, I've been reflecting on my professional future. While I'm proud of what we've built together as a family, I believe it's time for me to focus my attention more specifically." "Focus how?" Sophia asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "On the original Mancini's," I said simply. "This location has always been special to me. It's where I started at 14, where I learned every aspect of the restaurant business. I'd like to concentrate my efforts here, preserving and enhancing Nono's legacy at our flagship restaurant." My mother's smile was polite but dismissive. "That's a lovely sentiment, Elena, but as part of the restaurant group, this location will fall under Sophia's overall direction like all the others. Your operational expertise will be needed across all 15 restaurants." "Actually," my grandfather interjected, "that is not quite accurate." He nodded toward my bag. "Elena, perhaps now is the time for the papers." With steady hands, I withdrew the blue folder and placed it on the table. Nonno brought something important to my attention today. A succession agreement from 15 years ago that specifically addresses the original Mancini's. My father frowned, reaching for the document. "What agreement? I don't recall anything separate from our corporate structure." "It was when we created the restaurant group," my grandfather explained as my father scanned the pages. "You and Vivian were focused on expansion. I was concerned about preserving the original restaurant's character and legacy. My lawyer ensured that the flagship location would follow different succession rules." The color drained from my father's face as he reached the crucial paragraph. My mother, reading over his shoulder, gasped audibly. "This can't be binding," she protested. "The entire company was restructured when we incorporated." "It is entirely binding," my grandfather replied calmly. "My lawyer confirmed it last week. The original Mancini's remains separate from the corporate entity, and succession passes to the most senior family member actively engaged in operations for at least 15 consecutive years." He gestured toward me. "Elena has worked here for 17 years. According to the agreement you both signed, this restaurant is now rightfully hers." Sophia looked between our parents and me, confusion evident. "Wait, what exactly does this mean?" "It means," I explained gently, "that while you'll be CEO of Mancini's restaurant group, the original location belongs to me. I'll operate it independently from the corporate structure." "This is absurd," my mother snapped, her composure cracking. "We can't have the flagship location operating separately from the rest of the chain. It would create brand confusion and undermine the entire corporate structure." "Not necessarily," I countered. "The original Mancini's has always been distinct from the other locations. More traditional menu, higher price point, historical significance. That distinction could be formalized without damaging the overall brand." My father was still reading the document, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "This appears legitimate," he admitted reluctantly. "But, Elena, surely you see how problematic this would be from a business perspective. The flagship inspires the entire brand identity." "I understand that," I acknowledged, "which is why I'm willing to discuss licensing arrangements, brand coordination, and other ways to maintain coherence while respecting the legal separation. But the operational decisions for this location will be mine." Sophia, surprisingly, was the first to show signs of acceptance. "It might actually work to our advantage," she said thoughtfully. "The original location could be positioned as the premium heritage experience, while the other restaurants could evolve more flexibly with market trends." My mother turned to her with disbelief. "You can't seriously be considering this arrangement." "I'm being practical," Sophia replied. "If the agreement is legally binding, fighting it would be expensive and create negative publicity during our anniversary year. Better to find a workable solution." Her pragmatic approach momentarily eased the tension, though my parents remained visibly unhappy. My grandfather watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction, his eyes bright with approval when they met mine. "I propose we meet with lawyers next week to formalize the arrangement," I suggested. "Tonight is still about celebrating 50 years of Mancini's success, a legacy we all share regardless of corporate structure." Reluctantly, my parents agreed to postpone further discussion until after proper legal consultation. The evening concluded with strained politeness, a shadow now hanging over what had been a perfect celebration. As I helped my grandfather to his waiting car, he squeezed my hand. "You handled that with grace and strength," he murmured. "Remember, Elena, a restaurant is built on relationships, not just transactions. That's something your parents forgot when they chose corporate. Expansion over family legacy." I kissed his cheek, overwhelmed with gratitude for his foresight and confidence in me. "I won't forget, no, I promise." Driving home in the quiet pre-dawn hours, I felt a curious lightness despite the family conflict that had erupted. For years, I had poured my heart and soul into Mancini's operations, always believing my contribution was essential but never fully recognized. Now, I had the opportunity to prove my vision, not across 15 locations, but in the one that mattered, most historically. The original Mancini's was where our family's American dream had begun. Now it would be where I would write my own chapter of that ongoing story, honoring tradition while creating something uniquely mine. As the sun rose over Richmond, I knew the path ahead would be challenging. Family relationships would need careful navigation, legal details would require meticulous attention, and establishing independent operations would demand all my expertise. But for the first time in years, I was charting my own course rather than following someone else's map. The restaurant that had shaped my life was now mine to lead into the future. A future that would honor my grandfather's legacy, while reflecting my own vision of what Mancini's could become. The week following the anniversary gala unfolded with tense negotiations and uncomfortable family dynamics. My parents secured an appointment with their corporate attorneys, who confirmed what my grandfather's lawyer had already stated. The succession agreement for the original Mancini's was legally binding. The flagship restaurant was indeed separate from Mancini's restaurant group, and according to the terms, control had passed to me as the qualifying family member. "This is a significant complication to our succession plan," remarked Gerald Hoffman, my parents' longtime corporate counsel, during our Thursday meeting. His practiced neutrality barely concealed his frustration at discovering this overlooked document. However, the agreement appears unassailable. Ms. Elena Mancini has clear legal right to the property, business license, and operations of the original location. My mother's posture remained rigid throughout the meeting, her expression alternating between disbelief and calculation. My father looked more defeated than angry, perhaps recognizing that his own signature on the document had created this situation. "There must be some compromise arrangement," my mother insisted, turning to me. With forced reasonableness, perhaps Elena could maintain titular ownership while operationally integrating with the restaurant group under Sophia's leadership. I had anticipated this approach and was prepared. "I'm certainly open to discussing brand consistency and cooperative marketing," I replied calmly. But operational independence was clearly Nano's intention with this agreement, and I intend to honor that. Sophia, who had remained thoughtfully quiet through most of the meeting, finally spoke. "What if we approached this as an opportunity, rather than an obstacle? The original Mancini's has always been distinct, more upscale, more traditional. We could formalize that distinction with Elena maintaining the heritage brand while the restaurant group evolves under my direction." The suggestion showed both pragmatism and potential vision that surprised me. Perhaps Sophia's marketing background gave her an ability to reframe challenges that our parents lacked. "That approach has merit," admitted Hoffman reluctantly. "From a brand perspective, it could actually strengthen market positioning to have the original location explicitly presented as the heritage experience, that inspired the broader chain. My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication honed through decades of partnership. It was my father who finally nodded. We should explore this direction. Elena maintains independent control of the original location as specified in the agreement, while we establish formal licensing and brand coordination to maintain overall market coherence. The remainder of the meeting focused on technical details. How the original restaurant's finances would be disentangled from the corporate structure, which vendor contracts would need renegotiation, and how staff would be formally reassigned. By the meeting's conclusion, we had established a framework for separation that acknowledged legal realities while minimizing business disruption. As we gathered our things to leave, my mother pulled me aside, her voice low. "I hope you understand what you're doing, Elena. Running a single restaurant independently is very different from having corporate infrastructure behind you. The first time you face a major equipment failure or staffing crisis, you might regret this decision." Her concern seemed genuine beneath the criticism, but also revealing. She genuinely couldn't imagine choosing independent operation over corporate support. "I've been handling operational crises across 15 locations for years," I reminded her. "I think I can manage one restaurant, even without corporate backing." "We'll see," she replied, her tone suggesting she expected my eventual failure. Remember that pride comes before the fall. My father's parting was warmer, though still reserved. "Your grandfather always said you had the true Mancini instinct for the restaurant business," he said, briefly squeezing my shoulder. "I hope he's right." Outside the law office, Sophia fell into step beside me as we walked toward the parking garage. "That went better than I expected," she observed. "Though Mom's going to be difficult about this for a long time." I glanced at her. "You surprised me in there. I thought you'd be aligned with them in opposing the separation." She shrugged. "I've had some time to think since the announcement. The succession agreement is legally valid, and fighting it would just create family drama and negative publicity. Besides," she added with unexpected candor, "while I'm excited about leading the restaurant group, I know I haven't earned it the way you've earned your place. 17 years of operational experience versus my 3 years in marketing. Objectively, their decision doesn't make sense." Her admission startled me. "Yet you're not declining the position." "No," she agreed with a small smile. "I'm ambitious and I see tremendous opportunities for expansion. But I also recognize that what works for 14 growing restaurants isn't necessarily what's best for maintaining the heritage location. You've always understood Nono's vision better than I have." We reached our cars, pausing awkwardly in the strange new territory between sisterhood and business separation. "Do you think this will damage our relationship?" I asked directly. Sophia considered the question seriously. "Not if we don't let it. We can be both family and business associates with different domains. It might actually be healthier than one of us reporting to the other." As I drove home, I reflected on her unexpected maturity. Perhaps I had underestimated Sophia, viewing her primarily as my parents' favored child rather than as a capable professional in her own right. Her willingness to adapt to the changed circumstances suggested she might indeed have leadership qualities I hadn't fully recognized. The following Monday, I arrived at the original Mancini's earlier than usual, unlocking the front door just as dawn broke over Richmond. For the first time, I entered not as director of operations for a restaurant group, but as the independent owner of this specific location, a profound shift in perspective that made the familiar space seem somehow new. I walked through the dining room, trailing my fingers along the backs of chairs, studying the photographs that lined the walls with fresh appreciation. This place held not just my family's history, but my personal journey from teenage hostess to business owner. Every corner contained memories: the booth where I'd completed homework between shifts, the bar where Nono had taught me to distinguish, quality wines, the kitchen where I'd learned every station under Chef Marco's exacting guidance. In the office, my office now, I found the antique desk that had belonged to my grandfather. The heavy oak piece had been temporarily relocated during renovations and recently returned to its rightful place. I settled into the leather chair behind it, opening drawers to reacquaint myself with their contents. In the bottom right drawer, I discovered a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. The sight of it sent a shiver of anticipation through me. When had he placed it here? Recently or years ago, in anticipation of this eventual transition? I carefully broke the seal and withdrew a single sheet of Mancini's letterhead, dated just 1 week before the anniversary celebration. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, you have claimed your rightful place at the heart of what I built. The original Mancini's is more than a restaurant. It is the physical embodiment of a dream that carried me across an ocean and sustained me through years of struggle. I established the succession agreement 15 years ago because I recognized in you what others might overlook, the perfect balance of respect for tradition and courage for innovation. Your parents see only expansion and corporate growth. You understand that a restaurant's soul lives in consistent quality and genuine relationships cultivated over years. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, behind the tax records, you will find a leather portfolio containing my personal journals. They document not only recipes and techniques, but the true history of building Mancini's, the challenges, the mistakes, and the principles that ultimately led to success. Let them guide you when uncertainties arise. Leadership is lonely, nipote mia. There will be days when you question your path. Remember that doubts are not weakness but wisdom, the recognition that certainty is often illusion. Trust the instincts you have developed through years of dedicated work. Some will expect you to fail without corporate support. Prove them, wrong not through argument, but through excellence. The most powerful response to skepticism is quiet, consistent success. Con tutto il mio amore e fiducia, nonno Vittorio read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in my wallet rather than returning it to the desk. His words would be my talisman in the challenging days ahead, a reminder of both the legacy I had inherited and the confidence he had placed in me. Following his instructions, I located the leather portfolio in the filing cabinet. It contained 5 journals spanning decades, from Mancini's opening day to my grandfather's retirement. I would read them carefully later, absorbing his hard-won wisdom. A knock at the office door interrupted my exploration. Chef Marco stood in the doorway, his expression curious. "Elena, you're here early." "Good morning, Marco," I greeted him, gesturing for him to enter. "I have some news to share before the rest of the staff arrives." Over the next hour, I explained the succession agreement and the resulting separation of the original Mancini's from the restaurant group to my core team, Chef Marco, Francesca, our front-of-house manager, and Dominic, our bar manager. All 3 had worked exclusively at the flagship location for years, with Marco's tenure stretching back to my grandfather's active days. "So, essentially, nothing changes operationally for us," Francesca summarized. "We'll continue as we have been, just under your sole direction rather than the corporate structure." "Exactly," I confirmed. "Though we'll likely make some adjustments as we move forward. Without corporate constraints, we'll have more flexibility to implement changes specific to this location." Marco nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandfather would be pleased. He always said the original Mancini's had a different soul than the expansion locations." "Does this mean we can bring back some of the traditional dishes that were removed from the standardized menu?" Dominic asked, a hint of excitement in his voice. The braised rabbit and the sardine appetizer were always customer favorites here, even if they didn't translate to the broader market. The question revealed the first tangible opportunity arising from our independence. "That's exactly the kind of decision we can now make autonomously," I replied. "Marco, would you be interested in developing a special heritage section for our menu? Dishes that connect directly to our original Italian roots?" The chef's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. I still have all the original recipes, including several that Vittorio chose not to include on the regular menu because the ingredients were too expensive or preparation too time-consuming for volume service. By the time regular staff began arriving, a sense of excitement had replaced the initial uncertainty. We agreed to maintain normal operations for the immediate future while developing a strategic plan for enhancing our distinct identity as the heritage location. The transition wasn't without challenges. That afternoon, I received a call from our primary food distributor, informing me that my purchasing authorization had been removed from the Mancini's Restaurant Group account. "We received instructions from corporate headquarters this morning," the account manager explained apologetically. "All purchasing for Mancini's locations must now be approved through central operations." My parents had wasted no time in asserting control where they could. Rather than arguing, I simply thanked him for the information and began making calls to establish our own direct vendor relationships. By day's end, I had secured agreements with 3 local suppliers who could provide equal or better quality at competitive prices due to our reduced delivery requirements. Similar notifications arrived throughout the week. Our reservation system access had been restricted, our advertising budget reallocated, our staff health insurance plan would expire at month's end. Each obstacle required immediate attention and creative problem-solving, consuming long hours but also accelerating our separation from corporate dependencies. Friday evening, as I reviewed new insurance options in my office, Sophia appeared in my doorway, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "Peace offering," she said, setting one before me. "I heard about the vendor authorization issues. That wasn't my directive." I accepted the glass with a tired smile. Mom moving quickly to establish boundaries? "Strategic pressure points," Sophia confirmed, taking the seat across from me. "She thinks you'll reconsider independence once you experience the practical difficulties." I took a sip of the Barbaresco, our grandfather's favorite. "She underestimates my operational experience. Every problem she creates has a solution, just requires time and attention." "I know," Sophia agreed. "I actually came to offer help, not interference. The insurance situation. Our corporate provider offers small business plans that would work for your staff without requiring comprehensive medical histories or waiting periods. You could establish your own account, but maintain continuity of care." The gesture was unexpected. "You're undermining Mom's pressure campaign?" She shrugged, looking suddenly younger. "I don't want staff who've worked here for years to lose healthcare coverage because of family business politics. Besides, I told you I want to maintain a good relationship despite the separation. This seems like a practical place to start." Her assistance with the insurance transition proved genuinely valuable, enabling me to secure comparable coverage for our 30 employees without disruption. It was the first indication that Sophia might operate differently as CEO than our parents had anticipated, more collaborative and less adversarial than their approach suggested. The following week brought my first meeting with the bank. The original Mancini's had always been profitable, but separating our finances from the corporate structure required establishing independent banking relationships, credit lines, and cash management systems. "Your personal financial history is excellent, Ms. Mancini," noted Patricia Winters, the business banking specialist at Richmond First National. "And the restaurant's historical performance metrics are impressive. However, we would typically want to see 2 years of independent operation before extending significant credit facilities." I had anticipated this challenge. "I understand your caution," I replied. "But this isn't a new business, just a change in management structure. I've prepared these projections based on 5 years of location-specific data." I presented the detailed financial analysis I'd spent the weekend compiling, demonstrating both historical stability and conservative growth projections. Ms. Winters reviewed the documents with professional thoroughness. "This is more comprehensive than most established businesses provide," she acknowledged. "You've included contingency planning for equipment failure, seasonal fluctuations, even potential recession impacts." I believe in preparing for all possibilities, I explained. 17 years in restaurant operations teaches you to anticipate both problems and opportunities. By the end of the meeting, I had secured a business checking account, merchant services for credit card processing, and a modest line of credit for operating expenses, all essential tools for independent operation. The credit line was smaller than I'd hoped, but sufficient for immediate needs, with the possibility of expansion after 6 months of proven performance. That evening, I visited my grandfather at Golden Oaks, bringing a container of his favorite, osso buco prepared by Chef Marco. Since the separation, his health seemed to have improved, as if the resolution of the succession question had lifted a weight from his mind. "You look tired, nipote mia," he observed as I set up our dinner on the small table in his suite. "But it is the good kind of tired, yes? The tiredness that comes from building something meaningful." I smiled, serving him a generous portion. "Very perceptive, Nono. It's been challenging but fulfilling. Every problem solved feels like another step toward truly making the restaurant mine." "Tell me what you have accomplished this week," he requested, his eyes bright with interest. As we ate, I detailed the progress. New vendor relationships established, banking arrangements secured, staff fully briefed and supportive of the transition. He listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed his decades of business acumen. "Your mother has always been clever with strategic obstacles," he observed when I mentioned the insurance situation. "She tests resolve through practical difficulties rather than direct confrontation." "Sophia helped resolve that particular challenge," I admitted. "She's been surprisingly supportive despite her new position." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sophia has intelligence and ambition, but less of your mother's. How do you say it? Ruthlessness in business. Perhaps leadership will allow her better qualities to develop." "I hope so," I agreed. "The restaurant group will need innovation as well as ambition to navigate changing markets." "And what of the original Mancini's?" he asked, setting down his fork to study me intently. "What is your vision beyond survival, independent from the corporation?" The question struck at something I'd been contemplating throughout the hectic transition period. "I want to honor your legacy while creating something distinctive," I began, organizing thoughts that had been forming subconsciously. "The other, Mancini's locations will focus on accessible Italian-American cuisine for broader markets. We can embrace a different direction, more authentic regional Italian dishes, closer connections with local producers, and deeper engagement with culinary traditions." His expression warmed with approval. "You understand what I always intended, not just a restaurant, but a true expression of heritage and craftsmanship." "I've been reading your journals," I confessed. "Your philosophy about quality ingredients, traditional techniques, and creating genuine experiences for guests resonates deeply with me." "Those journals contain my true legacy," he said softly. "Not just recipes, but principles. The understanding that a great restaurant creates memories, not merely meals." He reached across the table to clasp my hand. "You were always the one who understood this, Elena. Even as a young girl, you sensed the soul behind the business." His confidence strengthened my resolve for the challenges still ahead. The practical difficulties of separation were substantial, but surmountable with diligence and creativity. The greater challenge would be establishing a distinct identity for the original Mancini's, while the restaurant group continued using the family name across multiple locations. As I drove home that evening, my mind raced with possibilities. The separation had been thrust upon me through my parents' decision to elevate Sophia, but it also offered unprecedented freedom to pursue my own vision. A restaurant that honored traditional Italian culinary arts while embracing contemporary sensibilities about sustainability, locality, and authenticity. For the first time since the anniversary announcement, I felt genuine excitement rather than defensive determination. This unexpected path might lead to something more meaningful than the corporate leadership role I had originally desired. Rather than managing 15 standardized locations, I could create one extraordinary restaurant that truly embodied excellence. The following morning, I called an all-staff meeting before opening hours. 28 people gathered in the dining room: chefs, servers, bartenders, and support staff who collectively represented over 200 years of experience at the original Mancini's. As you know, we're now operating independently from the restaurant group, I began. This transition creates both challenges and opportunities. While we'll maintain the Mancini's name and core identity, we have the chance to enhance what makes this location special. I'd like to hear your perspectives on what distinguishes us, what we do exceptionally well, and what we could improve. The resulting discussion was revelatory. Longtime servers shared stories of regular customers who had celebrated life milestones at Mancini's for decades. Kitchen staff described dishes they wished to revive or create. Bartenders suggested expanding our wine program to feature small Italian producers, rarely represented in American restaurants. Their passion and insights reinforced my growing vision, not merely maintaining the original Mancini's, but elevating it to become a destination that celebrated Italian culinary heritage with authenticity and excellence. As the meeting concluded, Marco approached me with unusual hesitation. "Elena, there's something I've wanted to discuss with you, but the timing never seemed right during the corporate transition." Yet entanglement with their financial problems carried significant risk. My newly established independence had created space for authentic expression of my culinary vision. Would helping the restaurant group jeopardize that freedom? The compliment, however reluctant, surprised me. "Thank you. The transition has been challenging, but rewarding." Francesca arrived with the wine, expertly opening and serving it before discreetly withdrawing. My father raised his glass in a toast. To family businesses, in all their forms. We drank, the familiar ritual momentarily easing the tension. Then my father placed a folder on the table, sliding it toward me. "We have a situation that we believe requires family discussion." I opened the folder to find financial statements for the Mancini's restaurant group, specifically the Charleston location that had been Sophia's signature expansion project. The numbers were dismal: significant cost overruns, revenue falling far below projections, and an alarming cash burn rate. "The Charleston location is struggling," I observed neutrally. "It's failing," my mother corrected with uncharacteristic bluntness. "And it's creating cascading problems across our operations." Sophia leaned forward. "We expanded too quickly with too little market research," she admitted. "I pushed for Charleston because demographic data suggested it was underserved for upscale Italian dining, but we didn't fully account for local preferences and seasonal tourism patterns." Her willingness to acknowledge miscalculation impressed me. "These projections show it consuming significant resources," I noted, scanning the forward-looking statements. "Have you considered closing it to stem the losses?" "That's one option," my father acknowledged. "But the lease terms make closure extremely expensive, and we've invested heavily in building renovations and equipment." My mother's expression tightened. "The broader concern is that the Charleston situation has created cash flow problems affecting all our operations. We've had to divert resources from other locations to cover the shortfall, which has impacted our ability to maintain quality standards across the group," Sophia added. "We're facing a downward spiral. Diverting funds reduces quality, which decreases revenue at previously stable locations, creating further resource constraints." I studied them, trying to discern the purpose of this disclosure. "I appreciate your transparency, but I'm not sure how this relates to the original Mancini's. We're operating independently now." My father exchanged glances with my mother before continuing. "We're exploring options to address the situation. One possibility involves leveraging the original Mancini's reputation and operational expertise." "You want my help?" I concluded, finally understanding the purpose of their visit. Your restaurant is thriving, Sophia acknowledged. The heritage menu has generated substantial positive publicity, and your financial statements show significant profit margin improvements over the same period last year. I hadn't shared our financial performance with them, which meant they'd acquired this information through other channels, perhaps from former staff members or vendors who worked with both entities. The realization that they were monitoring my business so closely was unsettling. What exactly are you proposing? I asked directly. My mother took over, her business demeanor fully engaged. We see two potential approaches. First, we could explore reabsorbing the original Mancini's into the restaurant group, using its strong performance to offset Charleston's losses, while implementing your operational standards across all locations. That would require me to surrender the independence guaranteed by Nono's succession agreement, I pointed out, which isn't going to happen. She nodded as if expecting this response. Alternatively, we could establish a consulting arrangement. You would provide operational guidance to help stabilize Charleston and implement quality control measures across the group, while maintaining your independent ownership of the original location. The proposal was more reasonable than I had anticipated, acknowledging both my expertise and my right to independence. Still, I remained cautious. What would this consulting arrangement involve practically? 15 hours weekly for 6 months, Sophia suggested, divided between direct work with the Charleston management team and broader operational consulting across our locations. We'd compensate you at standard industry consulting rates, plus performance incentives tied to measurable improvements. You'd maintain complete control of your restaurant, my father added. This would be strictly a consulting relationship focused on helping the restaurant group implement systems similar to what you've established here. I considered the proposal thoughtfully. While part of me felt vindicated that they now recognized the value of my operational approach, the very expertise they had deemed insufficient for leadership 3 months earlier, another part questioned whether entanglement with the restaurant group's problems would jeopardize my independence. I'll need time to consider this, I told them finally. The original Mancini's is my priority, and any consulting work would need to be structured to avoid compromising our operations or direction. Of course, my father agreed readily. Review the complete proposal, he indicated the folder, and we can discuss specific terms later this week. As they prepared to leave, Sophia lingered behind. Once our parents had exited, she closed the door and turned to me with uncharacteristic vulnerability. The situation is worse than they're admitting, she confessed, lowering her voice. The Charleston location's problems are partly my responsibility. I pushed too hard for rapid expansion without sufficient market analysis. But there are other issues they haven't shared with you. What kind of issues? I asked, immediately concerned. She hesitated, loyalty visibly warring with honesty. Financial management problems that predate my appointment as CEO. Dad made some questionable investments using company funds, and Mom approved higher than sustainable distributions to themselves over the past few years. The corporate accounts were significantly depleted before I took over. The revelation stunned me. My parents had always presented themselves as disciplined business managers, frequently criticizing other restaurant owners for prioritizing lifestyle over fiscal responsibility. How bad is it? I asked quietly. Bad enough that without significant operational improvements and capital infusion, the restaurant group could face bankruptcy within 18 months. She met my eyes directly. Your expertise could help address the operational issues, but it won't solve the underlying financial problems. Why are you telling me this? They obviously didn't want me to know. She sighed, suddenly looking exhausted. Because you deserve honesty before deciding whether to get involved. And because despite everything, we're still family. I don't want you drawn into a situation that could damage what you've built here without full awareness of the risks. After she left, I remained in the private dining room, my mind racing with implications. The restaurant group's problems were simultaneously vindication of my operational approach and a potential threat to my family's broader legacy. If Mancini's restaurant group failed, it would inevitably impact the original location's reputation and value, regardless of our legal separation. Yet entanglement with their financial problems carried significant risk. My newly established independence had created space for authentic expression of my culinary vision. Would helping the restaurant group jeopardize that freedom? The following morning, I visited my grandfather, bringing the financial documents Sophia had provided and seeking his perspective. At 92, his physical capabilities had diminished, but his mind remained sharp, particularly regarding business matters. "They have finally recognized your value," he observed after reviewing. "The materials, though necessity rather than wisdom, has driven this recognition." "I'm concerned about getting entangled in their problems," I admitted. "The original location is just finding its stride with our heritage focus." He nodded thoughtfully. "This is the fundamental question of family business, Elena. Where does business end and family begin? What obligations do we have to one another beyond contractual arrangements?" "What would you do?" I asked directly. His weathered hands carefully refolded the documents before he answered. "I would help them, but with clear boundaries. Not because they deserve your assistance after how they treated you, but because the Mancini name on all those restaurants still connects to your grandfather's legacy. To let them fail without offering your expertise would be allowing part of our family history to disappear." His perspective resonated with something I had been feeling but struggling to articulate. Despite the legal separation, the broader Mancini's enterprise remained connected to my heritage and identity. Its failure would diminish something meaningful, regardless of my independent success. "But," he continued, raising a gnarled finger, "I would insist on complete transparency and significant changes to their financial management. Help that enables bad practices is not truly help at all." Armed with my grandfather's wisdom and Sophia's insider information, I spent the next 2 days developing a counterproposal. Rather than merely accepting a consulting role on their terms, I would offer a more comprehensive arrangement that addressed both operational and financial management issues. When we reconvened at my parents' home that Friday evening, I presented my response to their proposal. "I'm willing to provide operational consulting as you've suggested," I began, "but only as part of a broader restructuring of the relationship between the original Mancinis and the restaurant group." My mother's expression immediately turned wary. "What kind of restructuring?" "First, complete financial transparency," I stated firmly. "I've prepared a confidentiality agreement, but I need full access to all corporate financial records, not just the information you've chosen to share." My father shifted uncomfortably. "That seems excessive for a consulting arrangement." "It's necessary because the problems extend beyond Charleston's operational issues," I replied, meeting Sophia's eyes briefly. "My consulting can only be effective if addressing root causes, not just symptoms." "What else?" my mother asked, her tone cooling further. "Second, I want quarterly financial reporting to continue indefinitely, with right of first refusal if you ever decide to sell the restaurant group." This provision was inspired by something I'd found in my grandfather's journals, his regret at not maintaining oversight of how his name and recipes were being used across the expanding chain. "And third," I continued before they could object, "I want a formal licensing agreement for the Mancini name and family recipes. The original location will grant the restaurant group ongoing use rights, but with quality control provisions that I can enforce if standards decline." My parents exchanged alarmed glances. "You're overreaching," my mother said flatly. "We asked for consulting help, not corporate restructuring." "I'm offering significant expertise and time commitment," I countered calmly. "But I need assurance that my assistance won't simply disappear into a broken system." These provisions protect both the original Mancini's and the broader family legacy. You know about the financial management issues, my father concluded, his expression a mixture of resignation and irritation. Yes, I acknowledged, and I'm not interested in assigning blame, only in ensuring that any help I provide creates sustainable improvement rather than temporary relief. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before Sophia unexpectedly spoke. She's right, she said quietly. We need more than operational band-aids. If Elena's going to help us implement systemic changes, she deserves transparency and ongoing quality control provisions. My mother's displeasure at this apparent betrayal was visible, but my father seemed to deflate slightly, the weight of carrying financial secrets perhaps finally becoming too heavy. We should discuss this privately, he told my mother. Consider the alternatives. They withdrew to the kitchen, leaving Sophia and me alone in the dining room. That took courage, I told her, supporting my position against them. She shrugged, though tension showed in her shoulders. It's the right approach. We need fundamental changes, not just operational tweaks. I've been trying to implement financial controls since taking over, but without much success. Your involvement might provide the leverage needed for real reform. When my parents returned 20 minutes later, their unified front had visibly shifted. My mother remained rigid with displeasure, but my father appeared almost relieved. We'll agree to financial transparency and ongoing reporting, he conceded. The licensing agreement requires more discussion about specific terms, but we accept the concept in principle. The negotiation that followed lasted well into the evening, working through practical details of how my consulting would be structured, what financial information would be shared, and how quality standards would be defined and measured. By midnight, we had established a framework that protected my independence while creating accountability mechanisms for the restaurant group's recovery. As we concluded, my father walked me to my car, the late summer air heavy with humidity and the scent of nearby jasmine. This isn't how I imagined our family business evolving, he admitted, his voice carrying unexpected vulnerability. None of us imagined this path, I agreed, thinking of how dramatically circumstances had changed since the anniversary celebration. But perhaps it's where we needed to end up, separate but connected, each focusing on different aspects of the Mancini legacy. He nodded slowly. Your grandfather would say everything happens for a purpose, even when we don't immediately recognize it. He would, I agreed, unexpectedly moved by this moment of connection. And he'd remind us that a family business is still a family, even when the business takes different forms. My father surprised me by pulling me into a brief, awkward embrace. We made a mistake, he said quietly. Undervaluing your contribution. I hope you know that I recognize that now. The acknowledgement, however belated, eased something that had been tightly wound within me since the succession announcement. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. Driving home through Richmond's quiet streets, I reflected on how significantly my perspective had evolved. 3 months earlier, I had viewed the separation as rejection, painful evidence that my years of dedication had gone unappreciated. Now I recognized it as redirection toward a path better aligned with my true strengths and values. Had I become CEO of Mancini's restaurant group as originally desired, I would have inherited financial problems not of my making and corporate constraints that limited authentic expression. Instead, independence had created space to honor my grandfather's culinary legacy while establishing my own vision. And now that independence would be preserved even as I helped address the broader family business challenges. The following Monday morning, I arrived at the Charleston location for my first official consulting visit. The restaurant occupied a beautiful historic building near the city's famous market, with architectural details that should have created an atmosphere of elegant authenticity. Instead, the space felt generic, indistinguishable from any upscale chain restaurant despite its premium location and pricing. The management team greeted me with visible apprehension, clearly uncertain whether I represented help or threat to their positions. Their wariness increased when I requested complete operational documentation, staffing schedules, inventory systems, training materials, and quality control processes. "We're following all corporate protocols," the general manager assured me defensively. "I'm sure you are," I replied. "But those protocols may be part of the problem. I'm here to help identify what's not working and implement solutions, not to assign blame." Over the next 3 days, I immersed myself in the location's operations, observing service patterns, working alongside kitchen staff, reviewing purchasing practices, and engaging with regular customers. The problems quickly became apparent: overly complex menu offerings that created execution challenges, staffing inefficiencies during peak periods, and fundamental disconnections between the concept and the local market. By week's end, I had developed preliminary recommendations that addressed immediate operational issues, while acknowledging the need for broader strategic recalibration. When I presented my findings to the Charleston team and Sophia, who had joined me for the final day, their initial defensiveness had evolved into cautious receptivity. "These changes make sense," the executive chef acknowledged, reviewing my kitchen workflow recommendations. Simplifying the menu to focus on execution quality rather than variety would immediately improve consistency. "And the revised staffing model addresses our weekend service bottlenecks," added the general manager, "though I'm concerned about explaining reduced hours to some employees." "Better to have slightly reduced hours with excellent service than full hours with disappointed customers," I pointed out. "We can reassess as performance improves." Sophia studied the complete recommendation document with focused attention. "How quickly can we implement these changes?" she asked finally. "The operational adjustments could begin immediately," I replied. "The strategic repositioning will take longer. We need to better understand the local market and adjust our concept accordingly." She nodded decisively. "Let's start today. I'll stay in Charleston this week to support implementation." As we walked to our respective rental cars later, Sophia surprised me by saying, "I've learned more about practical restaurant management in 3 days observing your process than in 3 years of corporate exposure. You have an intuitive understanding of how all the pieces fit together." "It comes from working every position," I told her. "When you've experienced the challenges of each role firsthand, you develop different insights than someone who's only seen operations from a management perspective." She considered this thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's why Mom and Dad's expansion model is struggling. They've been increasingly disconnected from daily operations, making decisions based on spreadsheets rather than practical experience." "That's part of it," I agreed, though the financial management issues Sophia had revealed privately remained unaddressed in our official discussions. Corporate growth requires systems and standardization, but restaurants ultimately succeed through consistent execution and genuine hospitality. Finding the balance is challenging. "Which is why we need your perspective," she concluded. "You understand both the systems and the soul of the business." As I flew back to Richmond that evening, I reflected on how dramatically circumstances had evolved. 3 months earlier, I had been deemed insufficient for leadership of the restaurant group. Now my expertise was recognized as essential to its survival. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the opportunity it presented, not for vindication, but for preservation of something valuable to my family's legacy. The original Mancini's would remain my primary focus and passion, the place where I could most purely express my culinary vision and values. But through the consulting arrangement, I could also help ensure that the broader Mancini name continued to represent quality and authenticity, honoring my grandfather's legacy across all its manifestations. Sometimes the path to fulfilling your purpose requires unexpected detours, I reflected as the plane descended toward Richmond. The succession I had originally desired would have constrained me in ways I hadn't recognized. The independence I hadn't. sought, had created space for authentic expression and growth. And now, the crisis that had prompted my parents to seek my help had created opportunity for influence without the limitations of corporate hierarchy. None of it had unfolded as expected, yet somehow it was evolving toward something better than my original ambitions had encompassed. Not just professional success, but wisdom to recognize that sometimes being passed over becomes the greatest gift, if you have the courage to follow the unexpected path it reveals. Proceed with Part 4. Make sure it's 3,500 words per part. Please, I want you to respond every part in a single response only. I don't want to see continue in next part due to length. Please write it in a single response. And don't ask confirmation questions if you will proceed or not, because when I tell you to proceed, proceed already. Don't ask questions anymore. And always remember that I don't want the story to look like repeating. I don't want the redundancy. Instead, you make it more motivational and inspirational. Like creating a scenarios to avoid being redundant. Instead, make it more motivational and inspirational. So proceed. Now 6 months into my consulting arrangement. With Mancini's restaurant group, the transformation was remarkable but incomplete. The Charleston location had stabilized through menu simplification, staffing adjustments, and repositioning as Mancini's Coastal Italian, featuring seafood-focused dishes that resonated with local preferences while maintaining our culinary heritage. Its financial performance had improved from alarming losses to modest profitability, not yet thriving, but no longer threatening the entire restaurant group's viability. My weekly involvement had expanded beyond operational consulting to include financial oversight. The complete record Sophia had provided revealed problems more extensive than initially disclosed, not just questionable investments and excessive distributions, but systematic mismanagement that had gradually eroded the company's financial foundation. We need to discuss permanent restructuring, I told my family during our quarterly review meeting at my parents' home. The formal dining room that had once hosted celebratory gatherings now served as our war room for addressing the restaurant group's challenges. Spread across the antique mahogany table were financial statements, operational metrics, and strategic planning documents representing hundreds of hours of analysis and implementation. My mother's expression remained guarded, though she had gradually accepted my involvement as necessary rather than intrusive. What kind of restructuring are you proposing now? The consulting arrangement was always temporary, I reminded them. We've made significant operational improvements, but the underlying financial structure remains problematic. Without permanent changes to governance and financial management, we risk sliding back into crisis once my formal involvement ends. My father sighed, looking older than his 65 years. The stress of the past months had etched new lines. Around his eyes and the salt in his salt and pepper hair had gained dominance. What specific changes do you recommend? I exchanged glances with Sophia, who nodded encouragingly. We had discussed my proposal privately, reaching alignment before presenting it to our parents. First, formalization of the separation between the original Mancini's and the restaurant group through a holding company structure, I began. The original location remains independently owned and operated by me, while the restaurant group operates under Sophia's leadership, but both entities report to a family board that maintains oversight of brand standards and financial stability. My mother's eyes narrowed. And who would comprise this board? All 4 of us, plus an independent financial advisor, I replied. Major decisions would require supermajority approval, ensuring no single faction could make unilateral changes. That might jeopardize either entity. Second, I continued before they could object, implementation of permanent financial controls, including limits on distributions, mandatory capital reserves, and quarterly external audits. These protections would apply to both the original location and the restaurant group. And third, a formal succession plan for both entities that focuses on merit and experience, rather than seniority or family position. This final point addressed the fundamental issue that had created our current situation, the arbitrary succession decision that had elevated Sophia, despite my greater operational experience. My parents exchanged concerned glances. "This sounds like you're proposing to undo the succession plan we already implemented," my mother observed, replacing Sophia's leadership with committee governance. "Not at all," I countered. Sophia remains CEO of the restaurant group with full operational authority. The board provides financial oversight and brand protection, not day-to-day management. It's about creating accountability and sustainability, not undermining leadership. Sophia leaned forward. "I support Elena's proposal," she stated firmly. "The past 6 months have demonstrated that our complementary strengths create better outcomes than either of us could achieve alone. The holding company structure formalizes that collaboration while preserving our distinct operational domains." My father studied us both with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between resignation and pride. "You two have formed quite the alliance," he observed. "When did that happen?" "When we both recognized that ego and territory battles weren't serving the family legacy," Sophia replied candidly. "Elena's operational expertise saved Charleston from failure, and her financial oversight revealed problems I couldn't have addressed alone. My marketing vision and expansion strategy still have value, but only within a framework of operational excellence and financial discipline. The holding company structure acknowledges both our contributions," I added. "It's not about undermining the succession decision, but about creating something stronger through collaboration rather than competition." After hours of detailed discussion, we reached tentative agreement on the fundamental restructuring, subject to formal legal documentation. My parents accepted the holding company concept and board oversight, though my mother insisted on veto power over certain financial decisions, a provision we ultimately modified to require her written objection with specific rationale, subject to review by the independent financial advisor. As the meeting concluded, my father pulled me aside while my mother and Sophia reviewed marketing materials for the upcoming holiday season. "You've handled this situation with remarkable grace," he said quietly. "When we announced Sophia's appointment, I feared we might lose you entirely, either to another restaurant group or to lingering resentment. I considered both options," I admitted, "but Nono's legacy meant too much to abandon, and bitterness would have diminished what I'm building at the original location." He nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandfather always said you had the soul of a true restaurateur, someone who understands that this business is about more than profit or prestige. It's about creating something meaningful that outlasts us. Is that why you agreed to the holding company structure? To preserve something meaningful?" "Partly," he acknowledged, "but mostly because you and Sophia working together offer the best hope for the Mancini name continuing with integrity. Your operational discipline balances her expansive vision. Neither approach alone would sustain us through changing times." Hi, his insight surprised me. Not just the acknowledgement of my contribution, but the recognition that collaboration rather than hierarchy might better serve our family's legacy. The following week brought an unexpected development that accelerated our restructuring timeline. The Blackwell Group, the investors Sophia had mentioned during the anniversary celebrations as potential backers for expansion, reached out with a formal acquisition offer for Mancini's restaurant group. "They're offering $15 million for the entire operation, excluding the original location," Sophia explained during our emergency family meeting. "The offer includes retention of current management and a significant expansion budget for new locations throughout the Southeast. That's a substantial premium over current valuation," my father noted, studying the formal letter of intent. "Given our financial situation, it warrants serious consideration." My mother's expression reflected conflicted emotions, pride, that outside investors valued the business so highly, but reluctance to surrender family control. "What happens to the Mancini name and recipes under their ownership?" "They want full rights," Sophia acknowledged. Their model involves acquiring regional restaurant groups with strong brand recognition, then standardizing operations while expanding aggressively into new markets. Standardizing usually means cost-cutting, I observed. Quality would inevitably suffer, regardless of their initial promises. My father nodded agreement. And once they own the name, they control its usage across all locations. Our family's legacy would become corporate property, subject to whatever changes maximize quarterly profits. The acquisition offer crystallized the importance of our holding company restructuring. Without formal protections for the Mancini name and recipes, selling the restaurant group would potentially compromise everything my grandfather had built. The original location might maintain its standards, but the broader market would associate our family name with whatever cost-optimized version Blackwell implemented. We need to accelerate the holding company formation, I urged. If the Mancini name and core recipes are owned by the family holding company rather than the restaurant group, we could license them to either family-owned operations or outside investors under strict quality control provisions. Creating separation between operational assets and intellectual property, Sophia grasped the concept immediately. The restaurant group could potentially be sold, but the heart of what makes it valuable would remain family-controlled. Exactly, I confirmed. It protects our grandfather's legacy regardless of who operates the restaurants, while creating options beyond simple rejection or acceptance of acquisition offers. The Blackwell offer, though ultimately declined, catalyzed our restructuring process. Within 30 days, we had formed Mancini Family Holdings as the umbrella entity controlling the Mancini name, core recipes, and quality standards. The original Mancini's and Mancini's Restaurant Group became separate operational entities under this holding company, each with distinct management but shared brand heritage. The formal structure reflected what we had already begun implementing, informally, collaborative governance that leveraged our complementary strengths while protecting the foundation of our family's culinary legacy. Sophia continued leading the restaurant group's expansion strategy, now with enhanced operational systems and financial controls. I maintained independent operation of the original Mancini's while providing ongoing quality oversight for the broader brand. 1 year after the anniversary celebration that had triggered our family's restructuring, we gathered once again at the original Mancini's, not for a public gala, but for a private family dinner to commemorate both our past and our reimagined future. My grandfather, now 93 but still sharp-minded despite increasing physical frailty, occupied the place of honor at the head of the table. Beside him sat my parents, their relationship with each other and with us daughters gradually healing through the collaborative work of rebuilding the family business. Sophia and I completed the intimate gathering, our once competitive dynamic, transformed into mutual respect and genuine collaboration. "A toast," my grandfather proposed, raising his glass of Barolo with a hand that trembled slightly but found strength for this moment. "To the Mancini legacy, not just restaurants or recipes, but the spirit of adaptation and excellence that has guided us for 51 years. As we clinked glasses, I reflected on how dramatically circumstances had evolved since the previous year's celebration. What had initially felt like rejection, my parents choosing Sophia for succession despite my greater experience, had ultimately created space for something more authentic and sustainable than the original succession plan could have produced. Had I become CEO of Mancini's Restaurant Group as originally desired, I would have inherited financial problems not of my making and corporate expectations that limited creativity. Instead, the unexpected path had led to dual leadership that honored our different strengths, Sophia's expansive vision guiding growth while my operational expertise ensured quality and sustainability. "I have something to share with you all," my grandfather announced after our main course, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to reveal." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew an envelope bearing the Mancini's emblem. 51 years ago, when I opened the first Mancini's, I wrote a letter to my future family, whoever would be carrying forward what I had begun. I sealed it with instructions that it should be opened only when the second generation of leadership had found its proper form. He placed the envelope in the center of the table. Recent events have convinced me that time has arrived. The restructuring you've implemented reflects the balance I always hoped would guide this family's business. Respect for tradition, alongside courage for innovation, financial discipline alongside generous hospitality, individual leadership, alongside collective wisdom. My father reached for the envelope with visible emotion, but my grandfather gently intercepted his hand. Not you, Antonio. This is for the generation now leading, Elena and Sophia together. The significance of his gesture wasn't lost on any of us. My grandfather was acknowledging the leadership transition not as my parents had originally envisioned it, but as it had organically evolved through crisis and collaboration. Sophia and I exchanged glances before I carefully opened the aged envelope. Inside was a single sheet of Mancini's original letterhead. The paper yellowed with time, but the handwritten Italian still vibrantly legible. I began reading in English for everyone's benefit. To those who carry the Mancini name forward, if you are reading this, the business I began with nothing but hope and determination has survived beyond my direct guidance. For this alone, I am grateful. But a business that merely survives is not what I worked to build. My dream was to create something that thrives through generations, not by remaining static, but by evolving while honoring its foundation. A family business faces unique challenges: the tension between tradition and innovation, between individual ambition and collective legacy, between financial success and personal fulfillment. If you have found the wisdom to balance these tensions rather than being torn apart by them, you have discovered the secret that many family enterprises never grasp.